Is the carnivore diet nonsense? Is it bullcrap? Let's check it out. There are plenty of theories either to support it or to demise it, but that's irrelevant. You cannot trust words ever in your life. Some words are true, some words are not. There are plenty testimonies of successful personal stories and probably some of insuccess. You cannot trust those. Words mean nothing again. But if you try it properly and you do it for 40 days without cheating, you can realize how great or how terrible you feel. From my personal experience and from what I've seen from those irrelevant testimonies and those irrelevant theories, this is the most effective formula for a whole bunch of different reasons who are completely irrelevant because only you trying it out will answer your question if it's nonsense or not. What are you going to do? You're going to eat ruminants or wild fish with some salted butter. This is going to account for 90% of what you eat. By far, the vast majority of what you eat needs to be around this. You can have other meats. Only 9% of what you eat, not more, can be some chicken, some pork, whatever. But it is facultative. If you do just this, you might get the better results, but you might not be able to sustain it because you'll get bored possibly. And also facultative, and in less than 1%, you might have some raw milk or kefir, you might have some honey, even some fruit, if you tolerate them. A lot of people do not tolerate cow's milk, a lot of people do not tolerate honey, a lot of people do not tolerate a whole bunch of fruits. If you did an IgG blood test, food tolerance, food sensitivity test, and you know you tolerate them, then eat, but only after dinner. And 0.1% and also facultative, you get others. You want to eat some bread? Eat a breadcrumb. You want to eat some seeds or some nuts or some vegetables or whatever, some pizza or whatever, 0.1%, some chocolate, some coffee, 0.1%. This means trace amounts that are there. For example, some seasoning, somebody put some pepper on your food, it's not terrible as long as it doesn't add up to more than 0.1%. So no, you cannot eat a whole piece of chocolate or a whole dessert in the typical sense of highly processed foods go, and even these so-called vegetables or greens or whatever, you cannot do those if you want to have success. So for 40 days, your diet will be high in fat, high in protein, and high in water. Do you know what these three are? These are the three only macronutrients that our human body uses to function at its best. Macro means big, so you need a big amount of fat, a big amount of protein, and a big amount of water for our bodies to function ideally. And then again, these are just theories, these are just words, and you can call them irrelevant for sure. Fat can be acquired through tissue. If for example, you get some wild salmon or some fatty, for example, goat, but typically it's very rare that we can find a truly fatty animal. Thus, I recommend you always add salted butter to your meal. Is the fish too salty? Then add unsalted butter for sure. Protein. Our bodies need a bunch of fat, they need a bunch of protein as well. If you ate only raw organs, for example, you drank the blood, you ate raw liver, raw brain, I mean, those are probably the three best foods on the planet, and if it's from a healthy young mammal, even better. But let's be honest, you go in a hotel, you go to the butcher, you go to whatever place, somebody's house, they're not gonna have raw liver for you to eat on the supper. That's why it's perfectly fine to eat muscle meat, and even if it's slightly well cooked. The raw, the better, but if it's well cooked, it's not terrible. It's just gonna hinder your digestion, and it's gonna reduce the amount of nutrients that you get from that same size of meat, meaning you will feel the need to consume more to get the same nutrition. Not terrible, not. Water, for as long as it's low fluoride and low in chlorine, it's perfectly fine. Some people prefer to purify it through a reverse osmosis filter. Other people prefer to buy some spring bottled water, as long as it's in a PET bottle. And as a micronutrient, meaning it's a trace amount that we need every single day as a seasoning, but not really as a nutrient. Actually, we need to get enough sodium. If you eat nose to tail, you do not need to consume added salt. If you just eat plain steaks, you need the salt, and it can be through the butter. Let's just recap. You might be worried that you will get too much fat. Oh, what about cholesterol? And I could tell you that the more cholesterol you have, the better hormonal health you'll have. But you cannot trust me. For sure, do not trust me. Do it properly for 40 days. Try it yourself. See how you feel. What I can tell you is that when we don't consume enough fat, and anyone who has studied medicine has to tell you by obligation that these are macronutrients. You need them in your dietary intake, both the fat, the protein, and the water. And thus, going below a certain threshold will demise your health. Every person in the medical field needs, by obligation of their job, to tell you that you need a certain amount of protein. If you go below, you won't get enough results in terms of tissue development, recycling of cells, etc. If you don't get enough water, the same goes as well. Plenty of functions in your body will not be well. What about consuming too much fat? If you consume too much fat, you will just poop it out. If you consume too much protein, it's just gonna be converted to more energy that you feel. If you consume too much water, you will just pee it. What about salt? If you consume added salt, if you get too much, you'll get an headache. But if you get too little sodium, you'll get an headache as well. So you need to make sure you fix a little bit of sodium in every meal to make sure your levels are stable. Ruminants or wild fish plus salted butter. This can be, for example, beef, lamb, goat, bison, deer, elk. This can be, for example, some egg medallions, very inexpensive, very delicious, wild fish, very practical. Just put them in air fryer, flip them over 10 minutes, and they're ready. 10 minutes each side. The best fish you'll ever have for the amount of work they take, and they have basically zero of the little bones. Other meats once in a while, but it's facultative. These are a dessert. You have to understand that milk is sweet, honey is sweet, fruit is sweet. These foods are desserts. These are pleasure foods. They are not really nutritious unless we are talking about the raw milk. So only consume them for pleasure once in a while, not even once in a week. and only if tolerated. What about eggs? If you tolerate eggs and you did the IgG food sensitivity test, the blood test, and you know you tolerate them, and you have access to pasture raised eggs, consume them as much as you wish. Please note that every type of egg contains anti-nutrients, meaning they are not an ideal food. They have compounds to protect the egg. But who am I to tell you those will not hinder your results because they're full of beneficial compounds for the majority of the part. I don't include them in my recommendation because most people only have access to eggs that have been fed, that were produced by a chicken in a horrible situation, that was fed corn that is genetically modified and soy that it is genetically modified in their feed. So if you want to consume them, add them to this facultative 9% and pasture raised. If you do this for 40 days, then you'll have proof if the carnivore diet works for you or not. Wasting times in words of theories or testimonies is something that you cannot trust, and it might be mostly irrelevant. I could tell you that Mr. Jordan Peterson, the most prominent psychologist in the world, does the carnivore diet. He had, for example, incurable gum disease and it healed after 3 years. I could tell you that Rebecca Farmer, or Eichmann, her married name, was on the brink of death and was told by several doctors she would never conceive a baby and she wouldn't pass 30 years old. She's around 35 now and she has been a mother recently and she looks glorious after looking like an anorexia on the brink of death 5 years ago. Does this work? Try it out for yourself and answer that question unequivocally. If you learned something from this video, please leave a like. If you know somebody who can benefit from this, send them the link. And if you want to check more videos just like this, or around home, around mind, around other topics that will improve your life somehow, check out my channel. There are plenty there. And if these are not enough, just hit that subscribe button because also more will come. Thanks.